So welcome everyone to the Traverse Area District Library Zoom programming. You can find all of our events at TADL.org/events, and you can also, and ones that we record like this one, you can find them, or if you want to replay them, on our YouTube channel, which is TADL Not Just Books. Again, for the 5th week in a row, which is fantastic, we have Alana, who is here, who is I'm going to get this wrong, even though I've said it 4 times. She is a member of AmeriCorps, a volunteer of AmeriCorps, and on behalf of the American Red Cross, she is did a series of disaster preparedness in September. And today she's going to be doing another one on a different kind of disaster, which is she's going to talk about hands-on CPR. So thank you, Alana.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. For all of these presentations, I'll just start by sharing my screen, and also I'll just mention before we get started that we shared a few questions in the chat. So if you haven't already filled those out, feel free to do that now so you can get an idea of what you already know about CPR. And it's something I have to ask for my AmeriCorps program. So it really helps me out if you fill those questions out, and you will also get them a second time after the presentation so we can track the learning impact of the presentation. So if you wouldn't mind even filling them out a second time, that would be great.
Alana, I wanted to let you know that I did the questions, and they are the emergency kit questions.
Oh, maybe I sent you the wrong ones. But I can send the right ones if you give me a second.
Sure.
That is my mistake. I have a lot of stuff saved for all the different things that I do.
And then we'll post the pre-ones here again if people want to do it as they listen along. And then I have people's email from registering, and so we will send out the second set of questions after. I'll email them probably tomorrow or something. Oh, great.
Okay, I've sent the correct ones now.
Yes, they are.
Sure.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so those are only a few questions. So if you want to fill those out while I share my screen, that would be great. Myself. All right, there we go. Okay, so thank you all for joining us today for our hands-only CPR presentation. And I'll also say I apologize if the audio gets a little funky. You might want to turn your volume up. I've been having a little bit of issues with that, so I apologize. But we'll get started now. We already talked about the pre-quiz, so you can ignore that slide. But first, we can begin by talking about what is hands-only CPR. So if you don't know, CPR stands for cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and specifically hands-only CPR that we're talking about today is chest compressions, no rescue breaths, no mouth-to-mouth involved whatsoever. So really easy and really safe, especially in today's world. Maybe you don't want to be doing mouth-to-mouth. Hands-only CPR can be used, when you see someone collapse or you come across someone who's unresponsive and they're not breathing in a normal way. So things like cardiac arrest, for example, are a time when you would use hands-only CPR. And the great thing about hands-only CPR is it's really simple to learn. It only takes a few minutes, but it makes such a huge difference. It is a life-saving thing that anyone can do. We can even teach this program to kids as young as like 6th grade. So this is something that a lot of people can learn, and they can save a lot of lives by learning this program. And that's what's so great about it. And now I have a video. It's only 2 minutes long. Remember I said it's so easy to learn. This video is pretty much going to cover everything that you need to know about hands-only CPR. Just let me know
how to perform hands-only CPR. Cardiac emergencies can happen anywhere. Be prepared with a simple technique known as hands-only CPR. You can learn it in minutes, it's easy to remember, and it can help save a life. You will need the willingness to act and a few simple skills. Whenever possible, use disposable gloves when providing emergency care. Step 1. If you see someone suddenly collapse, check the scene for safety and then see if the person responds to you by tapping them on the shoulder and shouting, "Are you okay?" Step 2. Briefly look for breathing. Step 3. If they don't respond, call or send someone to call 911 or the local emergency number right away. Step 4. If the person is not breathing or is gasping, prepare to give chest compressions. Kneel beside them and put the heel of one hand on the center of their chest. Place your other hand over that hand, lacing your fingers together. Position your shoulders directly over your hands, keeping your arms straight and your fingers off the chest. Step 5. Push hard and fast, at least 2 inches, then let the chest rise completely before pressing down again. Don't take your hands off the chest, just your weight. Step 6. Keep going. Do not stop compressions until the person shows an obvious sign of life like breathing. The scene becomes unsafe. An automated external defibrillator or AED is ready. You're too exhausted to continue, or a trained responder takes over. Step 7. Get training and encourage others to do so by taking an American Red Cross health and safety course. Knowing full CPR, chest compressions, and breaths will enable you to help in other emergencies such as drowning and choking. Every household should have at least one person trained in life-saving skills. Did you know? Most people who survive a cardiac emergency are helped by a bystander. To find your local Red Cross chapter, visit redcross.org.
All right, so that video had more than 3 steps, but the 3 most important steps are to check, call, and to care. So very, very simple. First, we want to check the scene and check the person. We're just going to check the scene for, safety reasons, make sure that the person is not in danger beyond them collapsing. Make sure you're not in danger because you never know why somebody perhaps collapsed suddenly. So we're going to check the scene and make sure everything's safe. And then we're going to check the person because we don't want to begin chest compressions if they're not necessary. That would not be appreciated. So we're going to check on the person by tapping them on the shoulder and asking them, "Are you okay?" You might even do this twice, maybe a little louder, get closer to them. "Are you okay?" And see if they respond. And we're also going to check to make sure that they're breathing or not breathing. Breathing in a normal way means chest compressions are not necessary. Anything like gasping, any abnormal breathing, or no breathing whatsoever, we're going to proceed to our second step, which is to call. So if we are by ourselves with this person, we're going to call 911, put them on speakerphone so we can begin chest compressions as fast as possible. If there's other bystanders around, we're going to assign someone to call 911. Point to someone specifically and assign them to call 911. because otherwise people get confused. If someone says, oh, someone call 911, everyone thinks someone else is going to call 911, time gets wasted, and maybe someone calls 911 or maybe not. But either way, it takes a lot longer than someone specifically being assigned to call 911. So that's a very important part of that. And then whether you're beginning chest compressions or maybe you're calling 911, either one of those important steps, we're going to go to our third step and care for this person by performing our chest compressions. And also down at the bottom, I have do not stop. Very important is to keep performing those chest compressions like the video said, unless you're switching out with somebody else who knows how to do chest compressions, EMS arrives on the scene, let them take over, or an AED shows up and you proceed to use the AED instead. Try not to stop chest compressions at any time. It's kind of tiring. So, all right, so I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about how to give these compressions, because it is life-saving to provide these compressions, but we want to make sure we're giving good and correct compressions. So very important is our hand and body positioning. So our hand positioning, we want to use the heel of our hand. This is the part of your hand that should be pressing down onto the person's body. And we're going to put it in the center of their chest. You can kind of see it on that picture on the left there, or even on the dummy that this man is practicing on in the other picture. We want to use the center of the chest. So if you can kind of see where your armpits start, you're going to get like a little lower than that, but not so low that you're, below the person's nipples. You kind of want to be right in the middle there of their upper chest, so to say. So that's where you want to press that heel of your hand. And you're going to put your other hand on top, interlace your fingers, just like that, just like this man in the picture there. And that's what you're going to press onto the body. And you want to tilt your interlaced fingers back at you so that they're not laying on this person's body. It's not a flat thing like that. You want to be tilting back so you're using that heel so the fingers aren't laying down, touching the person's body. As far as your body positioning when you're doing these compressions, you want to keep your shoulders directly above your hands. This is a really good picture of this person keeping a very straight line while she's doing her compressions. And this is really important because it moves the most blood throughout the body. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with these compressions. We're trying to move blood throughout the body so that it can keep the blood flow going and the person can, be resuscitated or stay alive during this time. So doing the shoulders directly above your hands moves the most blood in the body and is also the least tiring for you as the responder. You want to keep your arms completely straight with each push. So we're not doing any type of movement like this. No, completely straight the whole time while you're pushing down. And you want to push down at least 2 inches into the body and let the chest rise in between each push. You're not coming off of the body when you do these compressions. You should maintain contact with the body, but do let the chest rise back to its normal position. Generally, that doesn't happen too often, but if you are pushing too fast, it can happen. And you just want to make sure you're pushing hard with a straight up and down motion. And you want to give compressions at a rate of 100 to 120 compressions per minute, which is pretty fast, in my opinion. And otherwise, you just want to maintain a smooth, steady up and down rhythm and try not to pause in between your compressions like we talked about earlier. Try not to stop. But one of the reasons you would stop is an AED or an automated external defibrillator arrives on the scene. The great thing about AEDs is they're available in most public places. And just like we're going to assign someone to call 911, we're going to take charge and assign someone to go find the AED in wherever location that we are, the grocery store or the mall or at school, at your workplace. There is generally an AED in the area. So assign someone to go find that AED and bring it back to your location. And that would be a time where you would stop doing compressions and proceed to use the AED. AEDs are very, very simple, very easy to use. So don't be afraid of using an AED. They're really, really easy, but I also do have some very basic directions here that basically say turn on the AED. You're going to follow the prompts. You have to remove clothing from the person's chest to use the AED. You attach the pads shown on the package, or it might be on the AED itself. Essentially, you're going to sandwich, they call it, the person's heart with those pads. One goes on the side of their body and one goes on the front of their body, sandwiching the heart. You'll plug in the connector if that's even necessary. You'll make sure no one's touching the person. You'll push analyze if that's necessary with this AED. If a shock is advised, you'll push shock and make sure, again, that no one is touching the body. And then you'll just continue to follow those AED prompts. It might have you perform more compressions. It might have you, analyze again or push the shock button again. But it's very, very simple. You'll basically just follow whatever the AED tells you to do. All right, so that's the end of me talking about hands-only CPR. See, it was not that long of a presentation. Now I'm going to invite you all to practice hands-only CPR. Chances are you don't have a CPR dummy in your home. So if you can find one of the following things on this slide or anything else that can compress about those 2 inches that we talked about, and it'll spring back at you so you can keep doing compressions, anything like that will work fine. So if you want to do some practicing, you don't have to. And you don't have to turn on your camera, but you are absolutely welcome to. We'll do some practicing. I have a metronome even that will play, and we'll just play it for a minute, not the 5 minutes that are showing up here. So if everyone is ready to go, feel free to turn on your camera if you want. Don't have to. We will practice our chest compressions. Make sure you're keeping your arms straight.
So would you keep doing it like an entire time? You don't do it like 5 or 7 of them compressions and then stop? Because that's what you would do when you actually breathed into their mouth or something?
Yeah, so you would just do them continuously,
Okay.
as long as you're able to do it.
Okay. So there's no break whatsoever.
No break for, that like breathing portion. All right, that was of compressions. This is a little strange because if you do this class in person, obviously I'm watching people practice the compressions and I give them feedback. But often, things that I often see that people forget is like those straight arms or lining up their shoulders with where their hands are on the body, they kind of start to lean back. keeping those fingers like tilted back as well is another one that I see people like start to forget over time. Yeah, but it's a lot faster and it's a lot more work, I think, than most people think it's going to be. So if you really are practicing with us here at home, you might agree with me. And if there's any questions that you guys have, feel free to put those in the chat and I can address them. But otherwise, we're going to do one more minute with the metronome of practicing. And you might be thinking, well, if I was in a situation where I had to do this hands-only CPR, I wouldn't have a metronome because most of us don't have metronomes in our pockets or anything like that. Although you could pull one up on your phone if you wanted to. But the thing that people always like to say is you can sing like certain songs in your head that go to that same beat as the metronome, good beats for giving CPR to. And there's a ton of songs that match these ideal CPR compression beats. So I think most popular one is probably, Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. So you can always think of that in your head if you ever ended up in a situation where you had to give these compressions. But we will just do one more practice session and then we will be completely done. So get ready with your toilet paper rolls. One more metronome minute.
The funny thing is that you can only hear the metronome when you're talking. So maybe you should sing Staying Alive and then it'll work.
Oh, I should. Well, that's disappointing. But this metronome is going to, I believe, 100 beats per minute. So if that gives a better idea, it's like so it's like pretty fast rate to give compressions. I've taught a lot of high schoolers this program and they're like, oh, I'm so tired by the time we get to like the end of a minute. So I'll turn that off now. You can always practice on your own at home since you couldn't hear my metronome. But one thing I like to remind people of is if you were in an emergency situation, you would probably end up doing compressions a lot longer than 1 minute. So all those high school students who tell me how tiring that is, if you were in a real situation, you would probably end up doing it way longer than a minute while you're waiting for EMS to arrive and take over. So just something to think about. Don't want to put a damper on everything, but it is a serious topic. But that is my last, it's not my last slide. I do have a post-quiz slide on here just to remind you all to fill out that post-quiz, which the library will be sending out to you. It really helps my AmeriCorps program, so I would love if you would fill that out for me. Otherwise, that is the end of our hands-only CPR presentation. I thank you all for coming. It really is a very important skill, and I know that I feel empowered since I've been teaching this program. Feel a lot more comfortable with the idea of, potentially having to do this if I was in an emergency. So I hope all of you feel a little bit more empowered as well. If there's any questions about hands-only CPR or even volunteering with the Red Cross, if you have questions about that, please feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I thank the library for having me for multiple presentations. this was a really great partnership. I'm glad we could work something out.
Thank you very much. I would imagine when you're doing the hands-on CPR that especially, well, in practice, you know, it gets tiring, but I would imagine that in reality, when it's happening, that adrenaline kicks in and it just doesn't feel, you know, you just kind of go through it and it probably doesn't feel so tiring at that time, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you can always, you know, I talked a lot about not stopping, but you can always swap out with somebody else and have them do compressions for a while you take a rest. You know, that's totally an option. And it's so easy to give compressions. You could even, you know, teach someone right then and there, honestly, how to do what we just talked about, because it's really that easy. I mean, and even 911, you get them on the phone, they'll walk you through compressions if you're thinking, well, how am I going to remember all of this? Like years down the line, maybe I need to do something and I don't remember this Red Cross presentation. 911 will walk you through giving compressions, so you don't need to worry.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It doesn't, say that again.
I was going to say, it's always good to get certified.
Yes, that's true. Which you can do with your local American Red Cross. Well, thank you very much. It doesn't look like there's any questions, but we appreciate the time that you have spent this last 5 weeks giving us all this information. And I will get the post questions out to everyone via email if you don't mind filling that out for Alana. Well, thank you very much for coming. And I was going to say, I hope not to see you in a disaster, but really, I think that more programs like this is beneficial. So we do hope to see you again.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. I hope, you know, we can do some more stuff like this. Great to do them in person too.
Right, exactly. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.